So I'm Cam,
I'm Collin.
and we are both organizers of the Minecraft Bergen Championship, which we started like more than 2 years ago, and we thought it would be enjoyable to kind of look back on the development process as co-organizers of an event that has now been running for over a year. It's had its ups and downs, and I think it would be an interesting little retrospect to look at technical points, statistical points, and everything in between. So the Minecraft Bergen Championship is what this project is a chance for us to do something that we've been doing, or I've been doing especially for almost 4 or 5 years now. I've been organizing tournaments and events online with already existing games and online spaces, but because a lot of these places shut down and a lot of these places aren't able to be updated by us because we're just using them. We weren't really using them. We thought when we started developing this project in summer of 2022, it would be beneficial to start using our own sort of online space that we can create and manipulate and update as we wish. So what it is this collection of 6 games that we play that are chosen by the players in some order based off of the decision dome. So all 6 games are chosen in an order by the players. They'll play all 6 games and get a certain amount of points. As the tournament goes on, the amount of points will increase. And so we have things such as multiplied versus unmultiplied points, which measure different things. For example, unmultiplied is usually used with individual players because it gets more of a sense of how well they were doing throughout all the games, weighting them equally, while multiplied points are used for the teams as more of a fun thing to make sure that maybe in the last game it's easier for teams to get a comeback and get into the final 2 where the final game is played. Because this is Minecraft Bergen Championship 1, that means that this is the first one, and all the development before this point, like, it was probably the most intensive that we've had to do, considering we've had to make 6 games, almost 7, as well as the points in between the games, as well as making sure that everything's balanced. And while we had hiccups, it was generally all right. I think the first thing to talk about, I guess for you, because you were more involved in the technical aspects of the tournament, especially earlier on, is kind of like what that kind of development process looked like for this first tournament,
Mm-hmm.
where it was like, this is new. It's kind of, it has a more different like kind of like development process than the other ones where we're just making tweaks and improving things.
So I can talk a little bit about the development lifecycle. I guess to start off, we started this project officially in August 2022, and it saw some. We had like about a month of development before everyone got back to school. So we had originally a few games done even by the end of 2022, but we decided that the structure of the code wasn't the best for sort of continued development and maintenance. So we spent an extra year around in just improving the code, and well, year in like time sense. If I could speak a little bit to more on like our task prioritization. We also wanted to make sure, we were conducting unit testing for each of our games, which led us, even though we had like a lot of time over the summer, it was actually exceptionally difficult to get testers because in order to replicate a real test, we'd have to have at least 6 people, which is harder to get than you'd think when you're running this locally for a small friend group. And something that we realized is, or I guess we'll touch on this later in the tournament, is that it's really beneficial to have your testing group represent what the actual tournament will be like. So multiple people on each team and having one person on each team, which caused actually a bug in production during the actual tournament, which is unfortunate, but we learned our lesson from that. And a little bit on the task prioritization, since we were prioritizing the games, it was hard to get full system tests of the full tournament. We were able to manage a few and catch a lot of bugs during that time.
Now that we've talked about, I guess, development, I think we can talk about some of the development of the teams, because this is my favorite part. Because it is kind of using the statistical stuff that we have been looking into. Of course, this one isn't, because we don't have any stats for this one. Especially for this tournament, we were trying to make sure that not more so that the teams were balanced, because that would come later when we had the stats to back this up, but more so that people were going to have an enjoyable time and they were going to be with people that they specifically knew, to make sure that the tournament left a nice impression. And so I think if we look at, this is kind of the style that we ended up going with, where we'll have just 18 players in a row, and then if red is obviously the red team, green's the green team, so on and so forth. And so we have Cam version 1.1 and Cam version 1.2. And we can see that these are very similar, but there are very key differences. For example, if we look at Queeky here, Queeky moves from the purple team, where he's with these three people, to the blue team, where he's on these with these three people. So I think, but there are these little differences between these two that we had to kind of factor in to make sure that everyone would have the most fun experience possible. I think we ended up going with Cam 1 version 1.2 for the actual teams. Collin, I don't know if you want to talk more about that.
Yeah, sure. I think the most important factor in the team building process is the fact that, so we mentioned earlier before that that most of us went to the same high school, but at different times. So there's a little bit of a bridge that we had to sort of wanted to make sure that people were comfortable with teaming with people that were, because at this point, some of us were moving into college already, and other players were still in high school. So we understand that's a pretty significant age gap. And even though that some of us have been friends for a while, just because of like siblings and mutual friends, that not everyone knows each other. So the most significant challenge in team building is actually making sure that the teams are, well, as Cam mentioned, less so for this one, but balanced, but also everyone sort of knows each other, and that we were able to fit everybody who wants to play on a team that with people that don't know. So like Cam mentioned, this was we wanted to go for chemistry really for the first tournament. But at the same time, I think the teams were pretty balanced. And again, we have a sign up form that we use to track, so that we have a sign up form so people can put down not only when they're free, but also if they have specific team requests. So like, oh, I really want to team with this person or this group of people, or I would prefer not to team with this group of people. So that helped us a lot in gauging like where we were at with who can team with who, and has been a really big asset in helping us make these teams. We should probably mention a little bit earlier, but this tournament is, again, all for fun. So this is just something that we do to foster this sort of online community. And we want to make sure that all teams, at least most teams that want to have a chance at winning, can play at pretty much equal opportunity as the other teams, which is why we factor in test, like how often other admins test the maps and such other things that might give them an advantage, as well as just in general, other people. So a lot of people in this tournament are just only play Minecraft for this tournament. Other people will play Minecraft like more often than others. So you have a variety of different skill sets, which lends itself to be challenging with balancing, especially when there's just basically two sets of people that don't really significantly overlap. But yeah, that's.
I do think it's worthwhile to note that even though it doesn't really happen tremendously in this tournament, I think in the future we do combine a lot of the time some of the people who might not know each other, but we think will be good fits with one another. I think the first instance of this I can really think of is our third tournament, where we had two players from this red team. We had Kotaika and M Selection, who teamed with Sandwich Master XX, who are completely different in terms of age, completely different in terms of, where exactly they are right now, like geographically and, metaphorically, I guess. But we thought it would work out well, and it did. I think it did. They didn't win, but I think it was a good match, and there were people that they didn't know each other, and they, were able to have fun in this tournament that we organized. And I think even if they don't know each other tremendously well, it's at least to the point of, oh, I did team with this person once, and it was enjoyable, So I think that kind of segues nicely into the actual events of the tournament. I think we can kind of go game by game and discuss what worked and discuss what didn't. I think survival games is a good one to start with for Collin.
One of the sticking points for survival games is that it's a one-round game because it's a very long game, but it's a very intense game. But this can sometimes lead to incredibly unbalanced scores, and that's something that we didn't really think was going to be an issue. But actually, as we mentioned, our team building was not lent to prioritize team balancing. So it actually ended up that the winning team in survival games just completely swept. These are scores that we have not seen since in any other tournament. But yeah, if you if you take a look at the scores, it's really not. This is not. We aim to have teams be on a level playing field, but sometimes teams just are either too good, they pop off, and a combination of that is just lends to crazy numbers like this.
To be clear, this has not happened since. I do think I think Collin, we should probably talk about the issue that
the most significant aspect of survival games, besides the game balancing and besides the game design, was the fact that it ended up that after our first, this was played first. So all the games you see in this chart were played in order from left to right. So this was our very first game in the very first tournament. At the end of that game, our plugin crashed. So what actually happened is there was an off by one error in how we were indexing. So we decided to when the idea of sort of balancing out the scores at least a little bit in survival games was initially brought up, we decided to give teams a bonus based on when they were fully eliminated. So for example, the team that was first out got the 6th place bonus, the team that was out next got the 5th place bonus, all the way up to the 1st place bonus being the team that won, or the teams that won, which did not happen this time, but just one team won. So in the process of iterating through all the teams, there was actually an off by one error, just a simple, or just a silly oversight on my behalf. But what ended up happening is, since we were off by one, we didn't catch this in the testing because we weren't testing with all 6 teams. What we ended up doing was we tested that all 6 teams worked separately, or sort of depending on how many people we could get to test. Like say we would only get 4 people to test, and we would have one person on each team, so that's 4 teams, and then we would later get we would get 4 people to test a different day, just like maybe a different amount of people. So we wanted to test that we were able to run games with multiple people on each team. So we would test those last 2 teams that were not tested previously with 2 people on those 2 teams. But we ended up not. I suppose we ended up just not testing survival games with all 6 teams at the same time. So we ended up crashing. We have not had as bad a disaster as that. We've had crashes since then, but none as silly an oversight as that one. And thankfully, we didn't have a super major issue in the other 5 games that were played before the finale.
Yeah, so I mean, that's kind of the game that was, of course, the first one and the one that caused the most issue. It went relatively smoothly with some issues, but not too many throughout these other games. So these will probably go decently fast. To get to the other side, I could think it was one of the only games that I can think of another issue where we actually found out that you were able to not only left click the chickens but also right click them. And some people who were really trying to get to those chickens accidentally would left click and right click at the exact same time and finish. I think it was both first and second for one of them. Like, I believe it was, I think it was M Selection, who is right here, who finished in first and second place for one of the maps. That obviously shouldn't be happening because she was only the first player to get there and should not have been both the first and second. And so she got an extra like 20 points from this. And so we had to fix that later. That was one issue that we ran into. But for the most part, these games ran relatively smoothly and fluidly. To Sky Battle, also in that same vein, was relatively smooth. I can't really think of any issues that we had in Sky Battle.
Chef's kiss.
I think Collin is probably happy about that because he made that one. Build Mart, which, unpopular opinion, is my favorite one to actually play. I think that one was
insane
very nice.
take.
Okay, well, that one is very nice. If you notice that team balancing is a little off, we attributed this to the teams themselves, where the red team was very strong and experienced and well-versed in Minecraft, and a lot of the other teams weren't really. Later, we will see that this is not exactly the case, and we do actually have to adjust those points. But that is a topic of later discussion. I can't really think of... I think Nicola might have caught in the fan in this one.
Oh, yeah, so... there was just a few places where you could get accidentally stuck, and this was a recurring thing for a while. But yeah, Spleef and Ace Race went pretty fluidly. Was very happy with how well they were able to perform during the actual event. I don't believe there's any issues. I mean, we've been constantly adjusting the scoring for all of these games. Like Spleef in particular was one that we've probably changed like the scoring for Spleef like every event, or like almost every event.
The scoring for Spleef even this time is tremendously higher. Even if you ignore survival games, which was changed tremendously higher than everything else. I don't even know how that happened.
I think it was because again, for the technical side of things, there was there's just like where you get the points from. So in Spleef, we wanted to encourage you to get the most points by just living. So you would get points by how late you were able to, or by how late in the game you were able to survive until. But I messed up because I was fetching data from a different array. So I had an array for where you would get the points for all of the if we had 24 players, because the points would be we did calculations beforehand. I should say Cam did the calculations beforehand of like roughly like how many points you should get, how many points should be allocated to like for Spleef placement, or like all of the different games, depending on whether we had 24 players or 18 players in total, which was where we thought we would kind of aim for. I just ended up fetching from the wrong place because I was really optimistic, but you know, developers are always optimistic.
I think we can get into maybe Ace Race now. I don't know how many issues we really particularly had in Ace Race. I think Ace Race was very clean.
Ace Race was very clean, yeah.
Yeah. So at the end of all of that, I think we can kind of look at the team standings themselves and the individual standings. So it ended up being that the top two teams, or the two teams that would make it into the finale game and battle to see who would win, those were the Red Rabbits and the Purple Pandas, with these two massive scores that you can see up here. And you can see the individual scores. You can see how we weren't really prioritizing team balancing. If you look at the red team, who was all in the top 4, aside for one purple person. Shout out to this guy. I'm saying that because that's me. We do see that, even if it doesn't look like it, the yellow team and the blue team were fairly close behind. If we look before this final game, I think right before the Spleef game, yellow team is directly behind the purple team. After the blue team does very well in Spleef, we can see that purple team is kind of firmly in that second position, but doing poorly in this last game, especially with this high multiplier, can yield it so that blue team can overtake them or yellow team can overtake them with a strong performance. Didn't end up happening, but it was decently close near the end with these top, I'd say, second to fourth place teams. Yeah, I mean, I guess now we can kind of get into the finale between the Red Rabbits and the Purple Pandas. Yeah, so, I mean, the game didn't work in our plugin, as mentioned. I mean, like, we kind of expected it not to, because we didn't really have, when we planned this out, we expected it so that we were going to be able to finish everything. By the time the deadline came, we kind of needed to prioritize some things over others, and Dodgebolt, our finale game, was not something that we prioritized. It ended up being that Dodgebolt was put to the side because we already had a copy that was made from a different source on a different server. And so for at least the first 2 tournaments, we sidelined Dodgebolt, focused on our main core games, and just played this on a different server. I think, Collin, do you have anything more to say about Dodgebolt? Or at least from a technical point?
Yeah, from a technical point, I mean, it's been a little while since I've even looked at the code for Dodgebolt. It worked during our tests. So yeah, that's about all I can say about Dodgebolt. If we were to do Dodgebolt, like, if we could probably sink some time and get it to work, but I actually think, and this is probably something that we'll delve into in a future episode, but we found a substitute game, which I think was not only easier to develop, but also lent itself to a better paced finale for an enjoyment factor.
But I think generally, I guess as an overview and like a retrospect about this whole thing, I think, like, even with some of the issues that we had, especially in survival games, like, you can correct me if you think I'm wrong, of course, but I think this was a very good first stepping stone into developing everything else, making sure everything's polished, making sure everything runs smoothly, and for some of our tournaments down the line, which were much more focused on, rather than making sure everything works, like a player experience and making sure everyone's, like, I guess for this most recent one, just because it's Halloween themed, I was thinking spooked, but yeah, I don't know if you have more to comment on that in terms of.
Yeah, I guess in retrospect of this tournament, I think, honestly, I have not watched. So we keep recordings of where some players are able to record their perspectives during the tournament, and I usually go watch back some of these just to go back and just take in the finished product and the event that we had as a community. And well, I haven't really watched the first one in quite some time. I watched it a lot when we first had it, just because it was the only thing that we had. And it was honestly kind of surreal to be able to like, oh yeah, let me watch the video of us playing Minecraft in our event that we made, just because we could. And that was honestly, like, kind of just a different experience, and it still is, even though we had a lot of tournaments, and hopefully we'll have a lot more to come in the future too. But it was I think another point I want to make is that while I did watch it a lot back then, the tournament has improved so much since, and this is not even, like, I guess indirectly, but not necessarily a shot at our first tournament, because we did really good. We had a lot of great ideas, and we were able to implement a lot of them really well. It's just that with more testing, with more user feedback, and all of that, we were able to improve it just so much more. It's just kind of crazy how different we're 1 year after this first tournament, and it's kind of crazy how much we've improved and how much this tournament has honestly transformed. Even if you look at the spreadsheet, it might not show that, but just from the standpoint of having development and having played it, it's pretty insane how far we've come.
That's our first tournament. I think and the next one is more holiday themed, although it's not completely holiday themed, as we'll get to in the sixth one, which was completely Halloween themed. But yeah, so I'll end the little recording here.
I'm Collin, aka rspacerr.
I'm Cam, and
This has been Cam Cave.
we're not calling it Cam Cave. Don't call it that.